Hey, this is Gene. It's Friday before our biggest game of the season. Now in college football, especially at the end, every game is the biggest game of the season. And clearly, before we play Florida State or Florida, I would have just taken beating Florida, and not worry about the ACC championship game. But of course, now it's in front of us, and hopefully we do well. But before I go into this video, I just want to say thank you to those people who actually watch my video. And it's a kind of a strange story with this. I rarely get a lot of people watching my video. I got 500 people subscribed to my channel. I talk about other things from sports, stuff that's more controversial. If I had a bigger audience, I'd probably banned on YouTube. Um, but I've always loved college football. I love sports in general. So I talk about Manchester United, college football, even sometimes I talk about the Cardinals or something like that, because I have a wide variety of teams I support. I was born in St. Louis, moved to Florida when I was young, became a fan of Florida State and such. And later in other videos, I talk about that. But it's just crazy because the first 24 hours, I had like 5 views on my channel on this. And I thought I did a pretty good job with my stuttering that I have with my stroke, not being able to get all the words out because where the stroke was in my language centers. Before this all happened, I was a really good speaker, not as much anymore, but I was. But you know what, maybe I'll just change the name, because I want to also talk about the disrespect that DCU was getting for what they did last year. So I try to put it out there, and I put it out there on TCU's websites, and I try to get it moved that way, because I don't think a whole lot of people are actually pushing back at that narrative, and it's just always everywhere. And I thought that maybe I get some views for that. And of course, I don't want to get subscribers. I'm not going to make money out of this. It's just me and my opinion. And that didn't really do anything. And then a guy on one of the forums that I watch on Facebook that I just put on probably 2 weeks ago, like a Knoll forum, and he said he would like to watch it. So I just put it in there. And I don't know if he watched it and then shared it, or people saw it there and they started sharing it. So yesterday it was like 64, and I'm like, oh, that's about what I normally get. Maybe a little bit more than that. And then over the next couple of days or hours, just getting bigger. It was 200 and 400 and then 100 or 800 and 1,000. Now it's over 2,000. So all I can really say is say thank you for those that shared it or whatever they did. Somehow I got their mentions and they actually watched it. And I had like a lot of comments, only 1 or 2 that were really, they're not bad. They just think that Florida State shouldn't be where they should be. Because in my video, I said, well, tell me why we shouldn't be there. And also I talked about the sports media and their vendetta against Florida State for some unreasonable reasons. And I started watching other things after that video, and I watched another podcast, and it said that this was the War Check that said this, that our team in 2014 were a little bit arrogant. But again, we got what we got, right? We lost to Oregon, so maybe that arrogance got called out. And we got what we got. And that's really what happens in sports, you know. You just can't, arrogance doesn't give you everything. So I do want to thank for the people who've actually subscribed. I think I got 4 or 5 more. And if you want to, people that watch this, whoever watches this, you know, if you want to go on my website or on my my channel, you're going to see things that are not going to be related to sports. And it might offend some of you. But it's just my opinion. And as long as we still have the ability to do that in this country, I'm going to try to do it. So let's talk about where we go from now. I'm not going to make predictions when it comes to Florida State. I don't do that. I feel like every time I say we're going to win a game, and I'll give you some examples where I lost a lot of money and my sanity, okay? And I'll talk about, I understand why some of the Texas fans are getting upset. Oregon fans shouldn't say anything. If they win tonight, they're probably in. But they shouldn't really have anything to say. They lost to Washington this year. And I'll talk about in the past how we benefited by actually losing to a team and still have the position to win the championship. So when I said in my nightmare scenario in my video before that it wouldn't be shocking to me that Georgia would still be in if Alabama had beat them. Now, my thought process at that time is that if Alabama ran the table and looked good doing it, not just barely beating Auburn on the last play, that I think that would be somewhat that I would have to deal with that because they've done it before in the playoff era. Now they haven't done it to a Power Five undefeated team, but it just wouldn't mean it wouldn't do it, right? So I'm not going to make a prediction when it comes to Florida State and Louisville. Both programs deserve this. I look at Louisville like before we really became good. When we were playing everybody and that type of thing, we went anywhere. We played Nebraska on the road, stuff like that. I think Louisville is at the same level, and I think they have the ability that they could be really good as in a Power Five. Certainly at the same level certainly like Ole Miss or things at that level where they are. They could be the top 20 all the time. They have the ability to get good players. It's not a bad area to be, somewhat. So I root for them when they're not playing Florida State. I've seen what they've done to Florida State in the past, just blowing us out there in their place. Thank God we're not playing there. So it's a tough place to play, which was really shocking that they lost to Kentucky. But again, in-state rivalry. So I'm not going to make a prediction there. I do believe that Georgia's going to beat Alabama. And I'll talk about the permutations if that doesn't happen and how certain fan bases are getting almost triggered out of existence. Now, again, I would feel somewhat the same. So this is human emotions. Even though you don't pollute, and my wife continually says this, well, you're not on the team. So why do you keep saying we? I said, I always say we because I'm a somewhat of an alumni of Florida State that didn't graduate. I went into the military first or after. And my preferred thing was after I got out of the military that I was going to graduate. And then I went to Harris for a while, and then I had the big stroke. And it just makes it very difficult. Doesn't mean I can't. I'm about 9 classes away from graduating. And I continually think about doing this. I keep thinking they might take away my disability or shit if I do something like that, because I would still need help, right? And they have that ability in these major universities. They will give you help even though you're not on campus. And I want to be able to have that degree and then walk in Tallahassee. That's kind of like my dream before I die, as a personal accomplishment, because I wasn't ready to be in high school at that time, and I need a military to somewhat make me a man. So let's get into this. I'm not going to talk about Florida State. I think it's going to be close. I think both sides, if they don't turn the ball over, it's going to be very, very close. If one team does that, it could be very difficult for the other team. If looking at the weather here, I'm assuming that this weather is heading that way. Probably always is there. So I'm thinking it's going to be somewhat soggy. I think that as much as I think that it might not help Florida State because you think you have better athletes, apparently, that'll slow us down. I think that if we actually run the ball and dominate the time of possession, I don't think that Norvell is going to do this, that I think we win okay. But again, I'm not going to make a prediction. I feel that if I do that, it's like every time I think this, and I'll give you that little story before we go on. And this talks about this is the whole time about teams that actually beat the teams. See, I'm getting into other things, but I'll go ahead and say it. Miami beat us in 2000. We were the defending champions. Still had a great team. Another guy just commented on that video. Since 82, so he's been a Florida State fan for 40 years. Good for him. That's where we started getting good. We got to the Orange Bowl that one year, lost to Oklahoma at the end. Twice we lost to them in the Orange Bowl. Anyway, so they beat us. I think that was wide left, right? It was 27-24. We missed a field goal at the end. It was 50 yards, and he missed it. And I've always in the back of my mind, I kept thinking that I thought that Miami had lost later in the year, kind of like Notre Dame did in '93 when they were all upset because they should have been playing for the national championship against Nebraska, who was number 1. They were undefeated. But they lost the last game of the season at home to Boston College. So I never really looked at that as because, yeah, they beat us early in the season when they were number 1, or we were number 1, they were number 2, and we had a better loss, per se. And they lost to a decent Boston College team at home. So I never really felt anything about it. It kind of was Bobby's time anyway. And I think we're the best team that year. But I think we found out in that game against Nebraska that Nebraska would now become the dynasty right after that. So we realized how good that Nebraska team was that we won. And we had some help in that game, but they didn't do a whole lot to us, and we didn't do a whole lot. And we had guys who had the flu and all that stuff. But Miami, I've always respected Miami because they continually beat us when we didn't want them to beat us. And then the times we beat them, it wouldn't give us the national championship game. We beat them. We lost our first 2 games one year, and we lost to Southern Mississippi. And I'll talk about that too. I mean, when my son had to make a wish, and we went up to Green Bay and talked to, apparently he liked Brett Favre. And my wife, every time I do a video, she says something to me. So we went to Green Bay, saw a game, but he actually saw Brett Favre, and I asked him the question. I said, "How did it feel beating Florida State when you were at Southern Mississippi?" He said that was great. And after that game, we won 10 in a row, and we beat Miami. I think Miami actually went on to win the championship that year. But at the end of the year, I think we're the best team in the country. So that kind of like started the seeds of all these teams that not getting in at the end, not being the best teams at the end of the year, and you're seeing that now. But in 2000, we were the defending champions. So this whole thing about the nightmare scenario, I don't. Why is she telling me this? I don't care about what she's doing in school. So I said in that video 4 or 5 weeks ago, I talked about the nightmare scenario. Now you have a 2-time defending champion who might lose by 1 if they lose to Alabama, and how are we going to really keep them out of the playoff? Well, we were a defending champion, so I think that kind of helped. And like I said, I thought that Miami had lost earlier in the year. They had. They lost early on to Washington on the road by 8 points or something, and they beat us. So they ran the table, and the BCS gave us a little bit more points than Miami, and they just used the computer. They took the human out of it, and it would have been great if we actually showed up against Oklahoma, but we didn't. We lost 13-2. We didn't have an offensive touchdown, and we played just absolute shit. Now, again, that might have been arrogance, or maybe guys were not where they need to be. We lost our wide receiver before this game, but I will say now, I think that Miami probably would have beat that Oklahoma team if they couldn't score on us. Miami had a little bit better defense that year than we did. So I think that Miami would have won the championship. And that would have been another Florida-centric championship, and they would have 6 instead of 5. So I've always respected Miami. Clearly I thought they were a little bit better as talent-wise on most of those teams. But we had certain players that allowed us to do better. But of course, their program was somewhat, I don't think we were ever close to anything what Florida and Miami has done. It's still college football. There are certain things that happen, but I think Bobby somewhat ran a pretty good ship. So I understand Texas, and I understand the fact that Texas beat Alabama, and if they hope that Alabama beats Georgia, then they would, in their mind, that they would be above Alabama. And then if that happens, as a Florida State fan, regardless that we're 13-0, if we beat Louisville, there's going to be some people, they're going to be saying there's a possibility that we shouldn't be in. And they're talking about it now. It's everywhere. So when I did that video on Monday, it's ratcheting it up more and more and more. The closer we get to Saturday night, and back then I thought we're playing at the same time that the SEC or the SEC championship, and that was just stupid because I'm pretty sure that the ACC is always at night. And it's been, 9 years since we've been there, so that's probably why I'm not watching it. And Clemson has always been playing a team that that they were going to destroy. So it wasn't something I would watch. So we're going to be the final shade, whatever happens. And we'll know before we go out out there on the field, we're going to know exactly what we need to do. Now, there's going to be some things if Texas just puts 50 on Texas Tech. Oklahoma State. I'm sorry. Or if Alabama, well, it's not going to make a difference. Alabama probably would be in anyway. And I don't think at the end of this session or this little time that we have the playoffs that's going from 4 to 12 next year, that I don't think they're going to push out an SEC champion. I just don't think they will. But it's a possibility because it could happen. However, hasn't the committee also shown their cards by having Oregon in front of Texas? Oregon, if they win, they're going to beat a team that's in the top four. So that's a big win. It's going to be, if Alabama wins, Alabama will have the best win of the entire year. The next one after that will be probably Michigan over Ohio State. And then right after that, it's going to be Oregon over Washington. So, and then after that, would be Texas over Alabama, because Alabama now will be the SEC championship game. So it's champion. So it becomes very, very close at that time. And then if you pull in the SEC champion, then rationally, and I'm not a homer for Texas, but again, it's another program. I don't know if I said it in my other video, that I tremendously respect. Been to that stadium too. Was stationed in San Antonio. Used to go up to Austin all the time. Great schools. Great girls were so nice down there when I was in my 20s. I mean, had a lot of good times on 6th Streets, baby. So I'm with it, you know. Very liberal. Back then I was kind of that way, so I'm not really that way anymore. I'm kind of like in the middle. But anyway, that's a different video we can talk about. So I understand how they're getting triggered by all this. And I said it in my other video, and I'll say it now. If that happens, if Alabama wins, Texas boat roads Oklahoma State, who also got beat by other crappy teams, and they push them over us, and they have all these one-loss teams and just one team with undefeated season, which would be Michigan, and we're out, I'll be upset. But at the end of the day, I'll just say, so okay. It becomes at that time, it becomes subjective, and we'll still be playing somebody at that time. I guess we'll go to the Orange Bowl and play probably, I can't even know. It won't be Texas, because Texas will be in there. It might be Ohio State, and that'll be a great game, and it'll be ACC against the Big Ten, and I think it'll be a really good game. And both those teams will have a legitimate claim, if they win that game, that there should be the top 2 or 3 regardless. And if you're Florida State and you win that game, there might be a polling institution that gives you the national championship. I'll be upset. It'll be the first time they did anything like that. But I think the committee has already hedged their bets, because Oregon's there. They've decided at this point that Oregon is the better team between them and Texas. And if Texas would have been better, except having a really good game last week, if they had been good before that and continually beat teams, I hate to go to this point. You got to continually hit two or three scores above. Maybe they would have went up Oregon. But there's this thing you see at Oregon, the eye test, that they look better than everybody on the field. But again, they've got to prove it on the thing. And the interesting thing is, Oregon and Texas are big, huge brands. Texas, old school, huge amount of money. Just, it's Texas. You know what I mean? Hook 'em arms and all that shit. And Oregon's new money and Nike and all that stuff. So these are huge brands that they would want to have in the playoff. And we might see that. We might see Michigan, Alabama, Texas, and Oregon. And you would have 3 one-loss teams and 1 undefeated team, and Florida State on the outside. And I had to think about the times that we benefited when we lost to games head-to-head and still got to play in the championship game and had a chance to win. So it was under different circumstances. It was clouds. It was a CFP back then. So you had 2 teams. And then that's how and then the BCS was resulting of all that, because all the Notre Dame fans got upset about that because they beat us and they should have been ahead of us. They had their home playoff game against Washington College, and they fucking lost the game. I was watching that game and I'm like, we're out of it. We're gonna have a good bowl game or something, but we lost to them at Notre Dame, a game that we scored early on and just didn't really play for the rest of the time, and then we tried to get back in the game. Happened with before. Miami went down there, lost to Notre Dame, and had a touchdown that was given, so they ended up losing that game. And then Notre Dame parlayed that to be into the championship game against Western Virginia, and everybody thought clearly that Miami was clearly the second best team, and they should have played each other. but Western Virginia was undefeated, and they had a great quarterback at that time, and the game wasn't that close. So it's not like this is not new. When you hear that Florida State shouldn't be in the Final Four because they couldn't match up against the other teams in the Final Four. I said it in my video before. If Bama replaces Georgia, again, you might still get Alabama, Georgia, and then Michigan and Oregon or Texas. They could push this all out, right? And I understand where they're coming from. I do. But you have the first thing you have to do in the Power Five, in the criteria is to win all your games, be a conference champion and win your all games. So I think Georgia's out in that scenario at all. I think that's what happens. It's going to be shocking if they lose by like one, and I said that in my video, by one, that they'll be all the way out of the top four. But they did it to Ohio State. They lost by one score. So I think they've showed what they're going to do. If Georgia loses, they're out. Unless crazy things happen, right? Like Iowa beats Michigan, then you got Iowa's not going to be in there. But at that point, if Georgia and Michigan loses, then I think Georgia gets back in over Michigan because they were above them the entire year. I mean, there could be chaos, or it could be very, very easy. All the teams that are in the Pac-12 in college football, they have the ability to stay undefeated, and there will only be 4 undefeated teams. I think there's no question what happens at that time. And as bad as it might hurt for the people in Texas, or Oregon would have 2 losses. It's not, and Alabama would have 2 losses. So I guess at that point it'd be Texas that would be looking on the outside, and also Ohio State. The difference is Texas will have a championship, whereas Ohio State would not. It'll be bad for them. Clearly it would have been next year in the playoff, and they would have the ability to do something about it. Oh, here it goes. I'm a diehard college football fan, LSU fan, and nobody wants to play Florida State. I mean, these people that actually have been there and they've seen LSU versus Alabama, and says that LSU and Alabama went toe to toe until the quarterback got hurt. Like I said before, there's a possibility that Georgia, maybe Michigan, are a little bit deeper than Florida State. And clearly I would like to have Travis playing, but I think that this kid can do the job. And we'll know if we don't do the job on Saturday, we don't deserve to be in. Basically, it's a quarterfinal for us. It's a quarterfinal for Georgia and Alabama. It's a quarterfinal, not really for Texas and Oklahoma State, but it's a possibility it is. It's a quarterfinal for Oregon and Washington. It's just how the committee has it set up. And they could change everything because they're humans. They can go in and just change it. And just all of a sudden, Alabama for the 8th spot goes number 1. I mean, they could do it, and you're going to have people in the room talking about it. And you clearly have all of the big pundits online, like Joel Klatt and all these people, all saying that Georgia needs to be in no matter what, and Texas should be in no matter what, Oregon should be in no matter what, because somehow they think because they know, because they played the game. Well, some of that's true. But they're always wrong all the times and everything else. Like I said in my video before, everybody said that Michigan or Missouri would not do anything in the SEC, and now they're considered one of the top 10s in the country. Okay, whatever. But again, that's basically it. I don't want to continue on because the last video went for over almost 45 minutes. I do want to say thank you for those who actually watched that video. That whatever happens, it's still athletics. These are good kids for the most part in all these programs. I'm not going to root against any particular team. I'm just not going to do that because all those kids try. They're hard and they do so. I mean, it's a hard thing to be elite football player, to balance their grades and going out there and do what you have to do. Yeah, they get all the other stuff, right? They get money, they get fame and all that stuff. But it's still a hard thing, and it's only done by the very elite athletes, and that's what we like to watch. And I think it's going to be theater, and we're going to get trauma after. Hopefully it won't be anything crazy, but at the end of the day, as a Florida State fan, I really don't care what happens. we're going to know what we need to do at the end of the game. We already know what we need to do. It's a quarterfinal for us. We have to win it. If we don't, we're out. Pretty simple. All right, you guys have a good weekend, and hopefully I'll talk to you guys after the game, maybe on Monday, and we'll talk about what actually happened and see what we think is going to happen in the playoffs. We'll see. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to predict the other games. I think it's pretty easy. I think Michigan and Texas probably win. The other games are a little bit closer. So you guys have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you then. Bye.